India, land of mystery, is the 7th largest landmass and 2nd most populated nation in the world. It is rich in resources and manpower, yet its people are among the poorest and most suffering on earth. Millions of Indians suffer from malnutrition, disease, and poverty. The people are apathetic because their religion has taught them to be detached observers, disregarding the agonizing lifestyle which imprisons them. V.S. Naipaul, himself an Indian, describes India as a wounded civilization paralyzed by her religious beliefs. This complex and contradictory religion, known as Hinduism, promotes the worship of enlightened godmen called Gurús. And countless idols. It deifies both nature and femaleness, and believes Mother Goddess to be the original deity. She is worshipped in many forms, as Mother India, venerated in the shape of her map, as Mother Earth, reverenced in the cow, whose urine is even seen as sacred. In Goddess Kali, the goddess of death and destruction, who demands to be pacified with blood sacrifices. And in Holy Mother Ganges, the largest river in India. This river is worshipped by millions who flock to her banks to perform daily toiletries and annually dump hundreds of thousands of dead bodies to assure them of a better reincarnation. Its pollution does not dampen the spiritual fervor of the people who believe its waters to be essential for all religious ceremonies and imbued with magical and healing powers. Incredibly, the West is today looking to Hinduism's superstitions for hope. The religion that has all but destroyed India has now infiltrated every area of Western society. Protesting that it is not religious but scientific, it is transforming our minds, science, medicine, mass media, politics, and the church. Hinduism is most seductive when it wears the mask of Christian terminology and has shockingly managed to disguise itself as the latest Christian thought. Hundreds of thousands of Western pilgrims have journeyed to India seeking enlightenment and have disappeared by the hundreds. All too often they are destroyed by the madness and perversion of the very gurus they have worshipped and looked to for salvation. Here in Delhi, India, Guru Darshan Singh, only one of hundreds of gurus, has personally converted or initiated some 15,000 followers. He explains that it is the job of the guru to groom his disciples into the shortest path to salvation.
Salvation is the same, but you know, we have various paths leading to it. You know, some of the paths are long paths, other paths are the short paths.
Why is a master then necessary?
Master is necessary, you know, to groom you into the shortest path.
Descended from a long line of Hindu spiritual masters, Rabindranath Maharaj is a former guru and accomplished yogi who is worshipped by thousands. In his autobiography, Escape into the Light, he tells of his life as a guru and why he abandoned Hinduism.
The Hindu needed to be near his guru. The Hindu needed to consult his guru. He eventually saw his guru as the only means to salvation.
It is absolutely extraordinary also to look at disciples of some of these gurus that I saw in India, for example. These adoring, huge, open eyes that just will accept anything from him and that just love him beyond anything.
I loved Maharishi. I worshipped him. Therefore, everything he said or did or thought was perfectly right in my eyes.
I just met Bhagwan and there it was. It's nobody else than him.
Bhagwan is my master and I love him.
I'm in love with him. That's the only thing I can say.
Guru Bhagwan Rajneesh, given refuge by the American government after fleeing his native India, has purchased a 100-square-mile ranch in central Oregon, to which his red-clad disciples flock from all over the world. Whose astonishing title literally means highest spiritual teacher, Lord of the universe, honorable sir, and king. Carol Matriciana is a journalist and author of the book Gods of the New Age. Born and raised in India, she moved to London in 1973, where she became one of England's leading authorities on new religious movements.
During the various celebrations in Oregon, Rajneesh comes out in one of his Rolls Royces 2 or 3 times a day and is worshipped, literally adored by his thousands of Western followers. It is so saddening to see their devotion for a mere human being who considers himself God, and their submission to his spiritual rules, like wearing his picture around their neck continually, or wearing various shades of red always, or changing their names to Indian ones.
His spokeswoman and right-hand lady, Sheila Silverman, tries to explain the attraction and magnetism of her master.
He is something that is so... I have no words. It is a love relationship, master and disciple. Something happens in your heart when you see a master.
Bhagwan's my master.
Back in India, the proceedings are on a much larger scale. Here at the Kumbh Mela Festival, or Aquarian Fair, in Allahabad, India, 20 million Hindus gather to witness an endless procession of hundreds of these self-proclaimed God-men. Even the dirt beneath these gurus' feet is an aid to the disciple in his quest for salvation. This footage was covertly photographed and smuggled out of India. Naked priests are considered to be the holiest and most dedicated of guru disciples. Many cover their bodies with cremation ashes and dirt and mat cow dung into their hair. Some are armed and are dependent upon extremely potent drug concoctions. They have surrendered everything, families, possessions, and even their minds, becoming literally insane out of devotion to their guru.
Well, Guru is our best friend, philosopher, and guide, and he shows the way to God. So, we in our India acknowledge him as a divine power, just equivalent to God.
If anyone could be near the beloved Master and witness the love, the compassion, the humility, the grace, the generosity, no one in his right mind would not know that this is a walking, talking, living God on earth.
In all scriptures, you will find that the Master is the God-incarnated power working on earth.
You people that interviewed this gentleman today, I don't think you knew who you interviewed, but you interviewed God.
For the Hindu, the Guru is all-important. The Guru is his Lord, his Master, his Savior, even greater than God.
Yes, Guru is greater than God.
The Guru concept represents within Hinduism the personal dimension which God represents within Christianity.
I have personally talked with many, many gurus, and the sad fact is that within their belief system, they have to be detached and removed from their emotions and compassion, and their cruelty and inhumaneness is seen as spiritual and excused as holy.
I was really interested in their worship and their veneration and their adoration and the gifts and offerings they brought to me. But I was certainly not interested in their problems and their difficulties and hardships and pains.
The Guru followers believe that he returns this incredible love that they feel towards him. But in reality, he feeds off their emotions to maintain his own ego.
So many people come here because they too are in love with Bhagwan. They too are seeking the wisdom, the love that Bhagwan has to offer.
He has so much love, and he gives his love to everybody, and it helps us to find our love in ourselves.
The followers of Jim Jones, leader of the People's Temple, were convinced that their relationship was built on love. And nearly 1,000 of his devoted disciples committed suicide at his command. It was their final gift of total surrender to the leader they loved. Their lives cut short by a madman claiming to be God, the reincarnation of Jesus Christ. Guru Sai Baba is one of India's most powerful men with millions of Indian disciples and a growing Western following. He says of himself, "I am God. My power is divine and has no limit. There is no force, natural or supernatural, that can stop me or my mission." Today, hundreds of these professing God men are invading the West. Is there any need for alarm? Or should we continue to welcome these gods of the New Age? Prabhu Guptara, born and raised in India, is currently a journalist and media commentator in London.
Gurus are going to the West because of two reasons. First, of course, they want to convert people. They want them to become followers of their own religion, in some cases themselves. And secondly, because they feel they have something to offer. What these gurus have to offer is a family, a community to belong to, which they don't have.
Thousands of seekers, most of them from broken or unstable families, and already emotionally wounded, are becoming victims of the gurus. Dr. Os Guinness, an Oxford scholar and noted world lecturer, is author of the bestseller, Dust of Death.
One of the deepest longings in the modern world is for a sense of meaning and belonging, sense in their lives and sort of stability in their worlds. And people, having not found that in the West, are hungry for it. And reacting against the West, they're backing into the arms of the East without looking at it straight.
Ed Senesi is a former member of the International Society of Krishna Consciousness, known as the Hare Krishna movement. For 3 years, he was editor-in-chief of their magazine, Back to Godhead.
The attitude toward the family in the Hare Krishna movement is very unfortunate. The family is seen more or less as a necessary evil.
Eckhard Floater, a successful German journalist, became a devoted disciple of Rajneesh in 1979 and spent several months with him in India.
Rajneesh clearly says that the family, that marriage, that all these traditional family bonds are rotten. The only relationship that counts is between his disciples and him.
Kathy, devoted disciple of Maharishi Mahesh Yogi for 15 years, was a teacher and governor of transcendental meditation, known as TM.
I thought TM was strengthening my family, but it was really weakening it, because I was turning all my attention in on myself.
If you have an allegiance to your wife or your children, to the extent that you have that dedication to those people, you are less dedicated to the organization.
I either had to become a member so I could go with him, or he was going to divorce me because he was not supposed to have any outside attachments. He said it wasn't that he didn't love me anymore, and in fact he still loved me very much. It's just that I was only human and Bhagwan was superhuman, and therefore he was more deserving of my husband's love than I was.
Over 90% of the marriages in the Krishna movement end in divorce.
Rather than using our energy in raising a family and being involved in many physical relationships, we're focusing that energy on spirituality.
You see, what's so diabolical about all this is that it masquerades as spirituality.
In some schools of thought, to be spiritual, celibacy is encouraged, and yet in others, sexual perversion is practiced, not only among the gurus themselves, but by their disciples, including young children. Contradictions are also seen in the attitude towards women, who, on the spiritual level, are the focus of worship. Their femaleness is seen as the creative power of God. For instance, to be initiated by a female yogini is considered much holier than initiation by a male. And yet, on a day-to-day level, women are considered lower than men and treated as less than human.
Dr. Johannes Ågaard is a professor at Aarhus University in Denmark. He is considered to be one of Europe's leading experts on Hinduism and its worldwide missionary movement.
It's fair to say that according to Hindu doctrine, there's no salvation for women. Meaning that if women are to be saved, they have to qualify by serving the males in this life in order that they may be born as males in the next life. I had a conversation with a group of Hare Krishna female missionaries. Their leader argued, without the slightest irony, that the most foolish male is always more intelligent than the most intelligent female.
In the religious communities in India, which are known as ashrams, there is absolutely no place for children. And here in the West, the gurus generally don't want the burden and responsibility of children because it distracts the parents from devotion to him and his cause.
They have a school system whereby they force the children at age 5 to live in the ashram.
A lot of the kids did think it was like a prison. They didn't get to go anywhere but the ranch. And while we were at school, it's really just a place for the kids to go to get out of the grown-ups' way.
And they separate them from the mother and father, which is very unfortunate and very destructive.
Well, the kids would want to see their mom and dad, you know, just to be with them as a family. The kids wouldn't even know where their parents were, and they'd have to go look for them. And when they did, parents were usually too busy to talk to them. And so the kids were mainly by themselves and unsupervised.
According to the Guru Gita, one of Hinduism's most important scriptures, the follower must not only adore and worship the Guru as God, but surrender himself and all his possessions as well.
Most of the gurus that I know of in the West are super rich. Gurus are more interested in white disciples than in Indian disciples, largely because they get more money from the whites.
Rob, former transcendental meditator for 13 years, was a TM governor and in charge of teacher training at Maharishi International University.
The TM movement is very wealthy. They have land holdings all over the world. They have beautiful hotels in Switzerland. They have university campuses in the Midwest. They have academies on the East Coast, the West Coast.
Here he was getting served on silver plates 6 times a day, sleeping on a very soft bed, riding around in a Mercedes. But supposedly he was so renounced that he wasn't attached to these things, so that gave him a right to enjoy them.
Maharishi made a statement that says, when the money comes to me, he says it's transcendental.
It is part of the world of illusion, and the goal is to withdraw and detach yourself from it. So there's no high view of, say, social action or compassion or an outraged concern to see justice in this world. On the contrary, if you do things like that, very often you're just tinkering with a person's karma.
They believe that when a person suffers, that is what he's due as a result of the law of karma, because you've done something very sinful in this lifetime or in a past lifetime. So there's very little compassion.
One just was taught to ignore all of the dreadful, I mean, the intolerable poverty and suffering of India. There were beggars clustering around the gates of the ashram day and night, children starving, living in little huts surrounding what was supposed to be a religious community. The contradiction was disgusting to me, but most of the sannyasins failed to notice it. It appeared not to bother them in the least.
Life is suffering. Therefore, you cannot escape suffering without escaping life. Interfering with suffering, entering into suffering, is totally ununderstandable for a real Hindu.
I was a member of the Social Service League at the college, and we were trying to do what we could to help people in the villages. A gentleman who was head of the Department of Hindi came around to us and said, why are you doing this? These people who are suffering in the villages, sick or diseased or whatever, have come to earth in this state because they have done something wrong in their past lives. Now, no matter what you do to them, if you cut short their suffering in this life, what will happen is they will simply come back in their next life in the same state or a worse state. So you're really wasting your time.
Suffering is there, and you can't do anything about it. But you can meditate yourself away from suffering.
We feel that the cause of suffering is within, and so to allow people to experience peace themselves, we teach courses in meditation.
They seek to escape suffering by numbing their emotions and compassion through meditation. Maharishi, TM's guru, once said that a hungry person can become a happy hungry person through practicing meditation.
Humanitarian activities are, again, by principle, foreign to Hinduism. When they are found within Hinduism, it is a direct influence from the Christian missionary movement, a sort of imitation of Christian missionary activity.
Contrast, say, part of the Eastern view with the Christian view. One of the stories I've heard that meant a lot to many people is the story of the Zen poet Isa in the 17th century. He lost all 5 of his children and then his wife, whom he greatly loved, and each time one of them died, he went to the Zen master and said, now how can I take this? And the master said, always remember the world is dew, D-W. In other words, the sun rises, the dew disappears. Don't get hassled, don't involve yourself in mourning and grief. And he went home and wrote what became his most famous poem. And transliterated into English, it goes like this: the world is dew, and yet, and yet. In other words, the world is dew, there's the logic of Buddhism. And yet, the humanness which is not satisfied or fulfilled because it wants more of an answer than that. Now, you compare that, say, with Jesus, who face to face with death was not detached or uninvolved. He was angry and he wept. Why? Because death is outrageous. God didn't make the world like this. Something's out of joint, something's wrong. And the Christian view sees evil and death as the wrong they are and therefore fights them. And that's what the East lacks.
In the Christian tradition, the suffering is taken so seriously that God himself had to enter it and take it upon himself. Without this taking upon himself the suffering of mankind, there is no Christianity. That's the heart of Christianity.
Although the Hindu tries to convince himself that suffering is only in his mind, an illusion as he calls it, Maya, at the same time he believes that he has to suffer again and again by forever being forced to return to this world through reincarnation. There is no escape from this endless wheel of samsara, life and death, because in Hinduism, unlike Christianity, there is no forgiveness, because there is no sin. Therefore, sadly, also, there is no hope.
All the gurus that I know of in the Western world teach reincarnation, a doctrine very central to Hinduism. Reincarnation is all about dying and coming back to this world in one form or the other.
Hare Krishna people believe in transmigration of the soul, as they prefer to call it, traveling from body to body to body.
These physical bodies don't last forever, even though the soul does. So in the same way that a driver needs to change cars, in the same way we need to change from one body to another.
Gandhi called reincarnation a burden too great to bear. Yet it is being eagerly embraced in the West in diluted form, as part of a patent blend of Hinduism and Zen Buddhism, camouflaged with psychological terminology. This New Age religion is promoted through thousands of worldwide networks and hundreds of major gatherings, such as this Mind, Body, Spirit Festival held in Los Angeles. It is a westernized version of India's Kumbh Mela and promotes many of the same gurus and practices, from astrology and palmistry to psychic readings, healings, and meditations. The festival, now international, was started in London in 1977 by Graham Wilson. He explains the New Age interpretation of reincarnation as an upward evolution to a higher species of mankind.
We don't just reincarnate as an individual soul into a new body each time, but more of there's a collective consciousness of souls, which is why I think we have access to a lot more information than we realize.
Either one has to believe in reincarnation or resurrection. They both could not be true at the same time. There are those who believe that Jesus was a reincarnation of Krishna or Buddha or some other great master of the past, but the Bible would absolutely refute that.
Until the early 60s, only an elite few in the West believed in reincarnation. Today, this belief is accepted by nearly 25% of Americans and about 50% of Europeans. Likewise, yoga was once practiced mainly by an occultist clique in America and Europe. Now, over 19 million Americans and millions more in Europe are actively involved in some kind of Eastern meditation. Altogether, 60 million Americans have incorporated Eastern philosophies into their worldview.
The Bible teaches that Jesus came once and for all. When he died, he did not reincarnate, he resurrected. It is appointed unto all men to die once, and after death comes the judgment of God. I noticed that in the Western world, reincarnation has become something of a fad. However, in India and in Asia as a whole, reincarnation is certainly not a fad. It is a form of punishment.
This circle of life and death, dying and living, is a horrible understanding. It is understood as a horrible concept within Hinduism, because the only aim of the Hindu religiosity at its core is to get out of this circle, to escape this endless living and dying. And the means to get out of this circle of suffering is yoga.
Yoga goes all the way back to the Hindu god Shiva, who is called Yogeshwara, meaning Lord of Yoga. You find yoga being taught in several of the major Hindu scriptures. Krishna, one of the many Hindu gods, was an advocate of yoga. Yoga is also mentioned in the Gita as the main means to attaining salvation. The word means basically to yoke, union. The goal of the Hindu is to be yoked with Brahman. Brahman is the Hindu concept of God, the all or the absolute.
Yoga, in its many westernized forms, is also at the heart of the New Age movement that has adopted Hinduism's basic beliefs and goals. In spite of the seeming variety in hundreds of competitive schools of yoga, all forms come out of India and lead into the occult, though most Westerners are not aware of this. Yoga techniques include breathing exercises, or prana, positions called asanas, dissolving the mind, known as laya, psychic powers called siddhis, repetitious chanting, named mantra, and deliberately cultivating black magic, known as tantra.
In my extensive travels in India, I have encountered a number of Westerners who have got into Hinduism and begun following Hindu gurus as a result of a very simple initiation into a yoga class. Yoga is in many ways the heart of Hinduism. There is no Hinduism without yoga, and there is no yoga without Hinduism.
Although there are many types of yoga, the one most familiar in the West often passes for physical exercise and is called hatha yoga. It promises mental and physical health, but its Hindu roots and real goal to yoke with Brahman are seldom taught. Ellen believes that Raja Yoga, or yoga of the mind, is the highest form of Hinduism.
The Brahma Kumari's Raj Yoga is a form of meditation where the soul begins to understand itself clearly and has a connection with the Supreme Being. Raj means royal and yoga means union, so the link with the Supreme Being. And through this yoga, I become the ruler over my own self, over my mind and my life.
Johanna Michelson, former yoga teacher and assistant to a psychic surgeon, tells of her experiences in the occult in her autobiography, The Beautiful Side of Evil.
Another word for mantra is charm, or to cast a spell, if you will. And in mantra yoga, a word or a phrase or the name of a demon god is repeated over and over and over again to bring the individual to a vibration level that will attract that which is being chanted for, to bring about the desired effect. It's exactly what the white witches and magicians, so-called, use in the casting of their spells.
We were always told, no, it's just a meaningless sound. Had nothing to do with Hindu gods. But every time a person would sit down, they'd be invoking a Hindu god by thinking that mantra over and over again, be stronger in their life.
There have been glowing reports published giving credit to the gurus and their pseudo-psychological techniques, but neglecting to mention the thousands of cases of emotional and mental breakdowns, insanity, suicide, beatings, murder, rapes going on in guru centers, various guru centers worldwide. It is alarming to realize these dangerous techniques for enlightenment are being incorporated in psychotherapies, self-help seminars, and are even being accepted in mainstream Protestant and Catholic churches and seminaries. Although yoga is sold to the West through various gimmicks and techniques, its basic occultism remains the same. The hope of immortality is at its heart, and the dream of realizing one's own inherent divinity is its ultimate purpose. Becoming a Christ, they call it. Despite the claims that yoga is only physical and non-religious, it is the very essence of Hinduism's spirituality.
It eventually leads to the realm of the spiritual, to meditation, where the person looks into himself to find the true self, and in finding the true self, he believes he's finding God.
This new yoga in the West went into a sort of amalgamation with occult and Gnostic groups. And the Hindu mythology was put forward in a sort of demythologized way, which we now recognize in such terminology as New Age. The age of the enlightened man, the age of Superman, the man with super consciousness has begun. God is losing all importance. Man is the only thing which matters. And man is saving himself by his knowledge, by the development of his mind faculties.
You know, the frightening thing to me now, as I look back, is I started having the experience that I was God. And as God, I could completely structure my life and my universe exactly the way I wanted it.
Dave Hunt, noted author and lecturer, is one of America's leading experts on the New Age. His books include the bestseller, Peace, Prosperity, and the Coming Holocaust. He explains that Hinduism is based upon the same ideas that the Bible says the serpent introduced to Eve in the Garden of Eden.
The yogis teach the same lies that the serpent in Genesis 3 deceived Eve with, that death is merely the doorway to reincarnation, and that humans can become gods. This is either an unbelievable coincidence or an unmistakable identification of the mastermind behind Eastern mysticism.
This mastermind is called Satan in the Bible and is also known as the serpent, the ultimate power of Hinduism, symbolized by the serpent, is glorified and worshipped in Hinduism.
We see God as the form of light, and the name Shiva is used by our group, but meaning incorporeal being, radiating peace, radiating light, love to the whole world.
In India, Shiva is known as the god of destruction. He haunts the cremation grounds and wears a necklace of human skulls and wears serpents in his hair. His power is worshipped. Hindu texts describe the power as the fiery serpent within, called Kundalini. The old dread and fear of the serpent is being subtly removed from our culture. Even children in schools are being taught to accept the snake through yoga positions like the cobra.
Michelle, could you show us how we do the cobra? That's it. Arch your back. That's good. Look forward. Good. You hold it for a second.
Rousing this serpent power and forcing it into the spine, driving it upwards through a number of chakras, which are centers. You are expected to go divine, to become superhuman, to get supernatural powers.
The breathing exercises are designed to teach you to absorb the prana, the energy life force in the cosmos, to channel it into the chakras, the psychic channels, thus awakening the Shakti force, the Kundalini force, and bringing about those psychic powers, which are such an integral and prevalent part in yoga.
So very slowly, let's breathe in through our nose. Very slowly. Breathe in. Breathe out.
There are many dangers in the breathing techniques. Even the writers and the proponents of these exercises are quick to warn that not only do these things trigger emotional and mental diseases, which have been known to place people even in insane asylums for the rest of their lives, but they also recognize that these exercises can open your soul and your mind and your entire being to a takeover by demonic forces.
The followers of the Gurús themselves have been forced to form an emergency spiritual network of 4,500 MDs and psychiatrists to treat those who are freaking out on Eastern mysticism.
But the real yoga means gradually cut the relationship between your soul and the bodily world. You stop your life processes. You stop your thinking. No thoughts are allowed in the mind.
Many people don't realize this, but it's terribly dangerous to go into a meditative state in which the mind is simply left blank, and that ultimately is the purpose of the meditations in yoga. It's like opening the door to a room. Whatever comes through, you have no control over.
It is simply not true that yoga teaches you to breathe in the best possible way. Yoga teaches you to reduce the breathing down to a minimum and finally to stop it. You also have to stop all the movements of the body, all the movements of the muscles, the nerves, and bring your body to a complete standstill. In fact, there are some of the hatha yogic exercises which can be used as a sort of gymnastics. But fundamentally, it isn't gymnastics. It's in the same way as serving in the army has certain healthy aspects and perspectives. You get stronger, you get more vigorous, but the aim of the army is certainly not health care. The aim of it is to learn how to kill. The same with yoga. The aim of yoga is to learn how to kill yourself off, to get rid of life and death.
I thought I was being strengthened, but what I was really doing is flipping into an altered state of consciousness, a form of self-hypnosis, which is very weakening to the mind and to the body. But this weakness made me afraid to give it up.
The biggest danger I found in practicing transcendental meditation was the dependency on the technique itself. It's kind of like drugs. A drug addict doesn't want to give up his drugs, and because the experience is so pleasing, and he feels his life will crumble around him if he doesn't have it.
It is, in fact, a sort of psychotic withdrawal. Being afraid of contact with the external world, you create your totally alternative inner world.
I thought I'd have the experience of like leaving Shangri-La and all of a sudden turning old and weak and disintegrating. I was afraid that I would lose my clarity and my energy. But little did I know that when I did give it up, I gained all these things that I never had when I meditated.
We are raising an entire generation of children under the bombardment of cartoons and television shows and fantasy role-playing games and movies that are telling them that the occult and Eastern philosophy is a wonderful thing, not something to be afraid of, not something ugly and fearful, but something beautiful with the darling reptilian creatures with the great psychic powers that are drawing these children into an acceptance of things that are dangerous beyond anyone's comprehension.
The minds of children are being trained in the use of the supernatural and taught the principle of creating what seems like reality through Hindu psycho-spiritual techniques of mind power. Dungeons and Dragons, for example, requires participants to mentally murder, rape, torture, and otherwise commit mayhem with the aid of occultic powers. In at least one popular game, Hindu deities like the goddess Kali are invoked. Hindu religious techniques, including repeated chants, visualization, and casting spells, are used to overcome enemies. While infiltrating the Christian church, Eastern mysticism is also powerfully influencing world politics. Under the umbrella of the United Nations, countless New Age groups spread their philosophies worldwide. Many UN leaders, UN agencies, and the World Council of Churches with its deep UN ties promote New Age beliefs and practices. The UN has its own meditation room and resident guru, Sri Chinmoy. Even the United States Pentagon has meditation rooms. A graduate of Harvard School of Divinity, Leland Stewart, directs the Unity and Diversity Council, a powerful New Age promotional network that originated with a 1965 directive of the United Nations General Assembly.
Unity and Diversity Council is a worldwide coordinating body of what we call it individuals, organizations, and networks looking toward a time in which there will be one single organized energy of networking throughout the planet.
Under Stewart's leadership in 1982, this group linked arms with Graham Wilson's Mind, Body, Spirit festivals, forming a vast army dedicated to the merger of all religions into one, under a world leader.
I am very interested in the harmony of all religions. It's not just to give birth to another religion, but rather to produce, let's call it, a universal religious outlook through which there can be a new connecting of all cultures and all religions, all races.
In this growing consciousness of sharing godliness and looking for a leader to lead everyone into this new heaven, the UN plays a very important role inasmuch as it is a support system. Any group that meets to discuss these matters would be very eager and very careful to have UN sponsorship.
Our organization has been represented in the United Nations. We have an office there, and this has been going on for approximately 5 years. We've been involved in all the sessions that are going on in the UN. We've been able to watch and participate, offering meditations and presentations.
How is this possible? I think it became possible by the the thought and actions of one man in the UN, Robert Mueller, who was continuously emphasizing that the UN has to be a support system to this conditioning of man, to this sharing desire, to this looking for a one world government, for one world leader, and playing down, and I believe myself correctly, that the UN is not that world government, that is a conditioning device, that it is an aid, a support system. It gives prestige to otherwise completely outlandish groups.
The Brahma Kumaris World Spiritual University in India is used by the UN and its members for conferences focusing on world peace and unity.
Delegates from all over the world, VIPs, are attending to express their ideas and to experience peace in a very real way themselves. This experience will enable them also to draw up new laws for universal peace. This will be endorsed by heads of state and submitted as a practical form for the United Nations.
Many evenings, the UN building is even used for lectures, talks, meditations, enlightenments on how to make one better world. The leaders are asked to meditate and be involved because this is part of their instruction, of brainwashing, and all this is part of the conditioning for the vision of a new world or of a new age.
Actually, we're being prepared for this surrender to an authority in a way that perhaps we don't realize. We are going through right now strange bathing in Eastern concepts of consciousness, states of consciousness, bliss, reincarnation, energies, vibrations, all of these words that have become very commonplace, really, in the Western languages, are also modifying our mind. They are changing our way of thinking. And this changed way of thinking puts us into a mental state, if you'd like, and prepares our intellectual functionings for this surrender.
More than ever before, the human race seems willing to surrender spiritually and emotionally to a charismatic leader who can offer peace and prosperity to a world trembling on the brink of ecological and social collapse, international financial chaos, and a nuclear holocaust. Well-known New Ager Benjamin Creme claims to be the coming world leader's advanced public relations man. In 1982, full-page advertisements around the world announced the coming of Creme's New Age Christ, which gave fresh hope to millions. At this press conference in Los Angeles, he described how this Christ would make himself known.
It is a truism today to say that we are at the dawn of a new age, the age of Aquarius. And it is important to remember that all of the great religions await the coming of a teacher. The Christians await the return of the Christ. The Muslims await the Imam Mahdi. At the same time, the Buddhists await the coming of another Buddha. The Hindus await the return of Krishna, and the Jews, as always, await the coming of the Messiah. I'm speaking today about the return of such a teacher.
Christians are awaiting the return of the resurrected Jesus with the nail prints in his hands and feet. But the followers of the Gurús are awaiting a coming world ruler who won't even claim to be Jesus, but the latest reincarnation of the Christ Spirit, and he will have the psychic powers to prove it.
Simultaneously, throughout the world will take place hundreds of thousands of spontaneous healings and cures, which will reinforce, if that were even necessary, the fact that it is the Christ himself. The day of declaration will be the outstanding event of this or any other century. On that day, the radio and the television networks of the world will be linked together. We shall see this extraordinary face on our television screens. But he will not speak. His words will drop silently into our minds in our own language.
This is the significance of the altered state of consciousness reached in yoga and other forms of Eastern meditation. A Nobel Prize winner has described the brain as, quote, a machine that a ghost can operate, unquote. What that means is, in an altered state of consciousness, the connection between my spirit that normally operates my brain and my brain is loosened, and that allows another spirit being to interpose itself, begin to tick off the neurons in the brain, create an entire universe of illusion, astral travel, give psychic powers. In this way, the world is being prepared for some ultimate delusion.
He will indeed inaugurate a great new world religion, and at the very most sacred core of that new world religion will be the process which is called the esoteric initiations, which take us out of the strictly human kingdom into the kingdom of God.
David Spangler, board member of the Planetary Initiative for the World We Choose, which comes out of the United Nations, declares that Lucifer is the same force as Christ, that Lucifer prepares us for our own Christhood, that this is the final Luciferic initiation into the New Age.